This lesson is all about realizing when the individual is not responding to a diplomatic approach and it's time to look for another means of getting them out of the venue for the safety of all concerned within the venue. At the week-long official training course, a lot of the training is centered around being diplomatic with customers and how to handle extremely drunk customers so as to protect them from either hurting others or themselves in their drunken state. We're also taught how to basically defend ourselves should we find ourselves in a situation where the customer is basically attacking us. No matter who started the fight, because we as door supervisors are, for starters, are the sober ones, our actions are scrutinized the entire time a scene such as this is played out, and secondly, a person who is drunk or on drugs aren't their usual selves. So for that reason, we approach situations where it's likely to get physical with a lot of caution, having made sure we've exhausted all possible avenues to get that individual out without needing to go down that route. There was an incident I was involved in where a customer, on his own, had entered into one of the venues that I was working at one night. He seemed completely fine, but as the night progressed, and having had more than alcohol in his system, his presence started making the venue staffs extremely uncomfortable by the way he was acting towards the females within the venue. Having quickly made up my mind on how best to approach him, and knowing little about the level of aggression the venue found to be acceptable, I decided that I would start off by being diplomatic and walk him out of the venue without the need to cause a scene and have him be forcibly ejected, something that could definitely cause a bit of a bruise to his ego. At this point, my time in the world of door supervision could be compared to a newborn baby. That encounter would be the first time, although I hope it doesn't happen often, that I've had to physically and forcibly remove or, in our language, eject someone from a venue. And when I say I really mean my head door supervisor, and I was only a supporting act. My encounter with the individual seemed to have lasted longer than should have been necessary. I started off by asking to speak with him outside so that should he want to make a scene, it won't unavoidably involve the other customers who were out having a good time. Some couples who were on a date or just unwinding after a long day at work. Basically, my attempt to be civil with the customer ended when he refused to make any attempts to leave the venue and, in turn, started to raise his voice in my direction. The music in the venue at the time was loud, and I did try to use that as a way to get him outside of the venue where it was quieter without the need to lay a hand on him. Looking back, I could see he was simply trying to help me out by raising his voice, although in an aggressive tone. Joking aside, at that moment, when he raised his voice, the head supervisor turned round a corner and could see what years of experience offered him, that this customer required a GTF approach. The head supervisor basically said, "Enough is enough. We've tried playing nice, but it's time you left or be thrown out." In a flash, I had the individual by an arm and my colleague had him by whatever part of the body he could grab a hold of. And the best way I could describe it would be like dragging a toddler who's just gone a tantrum. It was nothing like I had trained for. The positives were, the situation never fazed me, but I also learned that the approach used almost entirely by the head door supervisor was an acceptable means of getting extremely difficult customers out of that particular venue. I have since learned that through other colleagues I've spoken with about that encounter, should that approach be used at the venues they've worked at or were still working at, then their management would have preferred a more diplomatic approach, even if it wasn't achieving any results. Soon after that encounter, within 2 weeks, I encountered a similar situation, but this time I was equipped with that experience and gave the customer a one-time offer to exit the venue on their own without the need to make a scene. As soon as I saw he was not prepared to cooperate, I had to, with the help of a colleague, forcibly remove him from the venue before he got a chance to make a scene. Personally, I've come to enjoy the nights when I'm able to speak with customers, even in their drunken state, who can still be reasoned with. Unfortunately, there are some for whom, whether they enjoy the extra level of attention or to have a story to tell their friends the next day, or for whatever reason, prefer to be thrown out in quote-unquote style. Although, something I'm beginning to realize is that it is so much more difficult trying to get a solo male out of a venue than it is a group of 2 or more. What I'm noticing is, in groups, guys want to save face, especially if they've been in the wrong, either by their conduct or whatever else. Their friends may never forget the time when one of them had to be forcibly removed from a venue over a door staff's shoulder, kicking and screaming. Their respect among their peers would be the definition of low, hopefully for a short time after the incident. With large groups, a lot of the convincing is done on our behalf by someone among the group whose opinion is respected by all, or in this instance, by the drunk individual. On one of my shifts one night, there were a group of 9 young boys, over 18 of course, but none older than 21. And one, as you would expect there would be, was becoming overly loud and banging on tables, basically acting as though they were in their own living room and not in a public space where there were others who prefer to not be disturbed by an individual being irritating and inconsiderate. Of course, that would be hard to expect from a group of young boys, having recently discovered alcohol and have had to wait 18 solid years to legally walk into a club or a bar and order an alcoholic drink. You and I, my listeners, know that having a fake ID and getting away without it being spotted means you can start drinking earlier than 18. Sadly, that's just the reality. Again, I started off being diplomatic and going directly to the young man in question to ask him to calm down, and for 10 minutes or so, he did calm down. But I returned to their table again, but this time, for the sake of the other boys at the table, who were not being a bother at all, I approached the most sober-looking member of the group to explain that if they could not get their friend to calm down, then they would all be asked to leave the venue. I don't know if I should have given them that many warnings, but I wanted to give them a chance to be the grown-ups that, by looking at them, have always wanted to be respected and taken seriously, and not be given a label because of their age. Sadly, they showed they still had a good bit of maturing to do. As you might have guessed by now, the same boy raised his decibel levels beyond respectful for the final time that night, and I was over at their table, and the adult passes they were handed on their way in were revoked and had to leave. For a minute or two, the overly drunk boy started becoming verbally abusive, but in the same moment, as they were being escorted out, a member of the group said something to him, and it saved us the trouble of having to forcibly remove him. Essentially, the group, or a sober member of the group, with some authority, got them all to walk out of the venue without any further issues. And that would be a rare case of where the diplomatic approach, not from us, but from a member of the group, was able to talk them out of the venue without needing to go beyond a diplomatic approach. That's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.